We all know the libs believe in men being women. And it recently was Women's History Month. I guess it's still Women's History Month. And to celebrate Women's History Month, ESPN decided to run a whole laudatory segment on the most important woman in sports. That would be, of course, William Leah Thomas.
In 2022, swimmer Leah Thomas became the first transgender athlete to win an NCAA Division I championship by winning the 500 freestyle. The Texas native competed for 3 seasons on the men's swim team at the University of Pennsylvania. She began her transition after her sophomore season and after a gap year due to the pandemic that forced the Ivy League to cancel all sports. Thomas made her debut as a member of the women's team in December 2021.
Being trans is not a choice. I didn't have any other choice because not transitioning was not leading me anywhere.
She competed amidst criticism from the swimming community, competitors, and teammates. She said she hopes her persistence serves a larger purpose.
People will say, oh, she just transitioned, so she would have an advantage, so she could win. I transitioned to be happy.
You know, I never said that Will Thomas only transitioned so that he could win swimming races. He was a very low-ranked male swimmer, and then he became the number 1 ranked female, quote-unquote, swimmer. So maybe that played a role in it, probably did play some role in it. But no, I think he transitioned more for the reason that he says there, he said, to be happy. Now, it won't make him happy. I think social science is mostly bunk, but the surveys that we have on this show that the transition does not actually make people any happier than they were beforehand. And it is not the right thing to do because men can't become women and women can't become men, and your body and soul are united in a hylomorphic union. And everybody on earth knew this until 5 minutes ago. And living according to and chopping up your body and doing all sorts of weird, nasty things is not going to make anybody happy, really, in the long run, ever. It certainly won't lead to human flourishing. But I have no doubt that he did it in part because he's just confused. He's a confused guy. He said, I had no choice. Of course you had a choice. You didn't need to. You could just be normal. You could just act normal and be normal. And you might have some weird fantasies in your head, but you can either suppress them or sublimate those fantasies or indulge them in the privacy of your own home, but not pretend for public purposes that you're a woman and then go into the women's locker room and take your clothing off and start exposing yourself to girls who don't want to see that. You had that choice. You just chose not to. You chose to deny your own agency and your own free will in the matter. But forget about Will Thomas for a second. I had forgotten about Women's History Month because I don't pay attention to any of the liturgical months on the liturgical calendar of liberalism. I don't pay attention to Black History Month. I don't pay attention to Women's History Month. I don't pay attention to the now multiple gay months. I have my own liturgical calendar that I follow, which is the calendar of the church. So we have months to, to marry and, different liturgical feasts that do not celebrate liberalism. But this proves my point. I think this is a total vindication of why we need to ignore all these liberal months. Black History Month, Women's History Month. Because Women's History Month, we can now conclude with certainty, is not about women. It's not. All the women, quote unquote, who have been lauded during Women's History Month by the White House, by ESPN, by the culture, they're all men. So it has nothing to do with women. It has everything to do with liberalism and leftism. Black History Month is only tangentially related to Black people. True, ESPN doesn't run fawning profiles of Rachel Dolezal. They haven't yet embraced transracialism, but likewise, you're not going to see any fawning profiles of Clarence Thomas. You're not going to see any fawning profiles of Thomas Sowell. You're not going to see any fawning profiles of Booker T. Washington, for that matter. You're not going to see any fawning profiles of Candace Owens, I don't think. No, you're only going to see a certain kind of Black person. And very often a manufactured leftist caricature of a certain type of Black person. Because it's not about Black people, it's about liberalism and leftism. So we should ignore all of that. Ignore all of those things. How about for the gay months? You're never going to see profiles of men who, let's say they have some desire and they just don't act on it. Will Thomas says, I had no choice but to chop my body parts off and pretend to be a woman. You could have not done that. You could have just been normal. You could have, by that I mean, you could have acted in accord with the norms and standards set by society through their use of right reason and their deference to the wisdom of the ages, which is a far better guide to human flourishing than what some quack doctors in the 60s decided was best for confused men, which is to mutilate themselves and live according to a fantasy. Could have just been normal. Of course you have that. But you never see LGBT History Month celebrating detransitioners. Helena Kirchner is not going to be, Walt Heyer is not going to be celebrated in any of the multiple LGBT history months. So it's kind of funny. It's dark, but it's kind of funny that Will Thomas is the woman of the month, the woman of the year for Women's History Month on ESPN. Sometimes it's a lot less funny. There's a video that went viral. I had our editors blur basically the whole thing, but you can get a little sense of it anyway. A 13-year-old drag queen, a little boy who was dressed up in sexual clothing to look like a girl, like a very sexualized girl, was just videotaped and went viral, dancing around at a club while a bunch of pervert adults cheered him on. You can sort of vaguely make out he's wearing these leather stiletto heels and a leather kind of dress skirt thing and is dancing around in a very sexualized posture. And then these total freak perverts on the side are cheering him on. What are they cheering on? They're cheering on a sexual performance of a 13-year-old boy dressed in a tight leather outfit. This isn't, the slippery slope might be slipping down. This isn't some conspiracy theory idea. There are elite pedos in our culture, and they have a lot of power, and, you've got to talk to the Illuminati and the Rosicrucians, and I don't know, some tinfoil hat stuff. It's on video. You're watching it. Even the idea of an elite pedo ring that's so elite that they have, let's say their own private island in the Caribbean, and some of the most notable, wealthy, powerful people on earth go to this island to do weird stuff with very young, underage people. That's not a crazy conspiracy theory. We have the court documents. We have pictures in some cases. That's real. That's happening. It reminds me of a line from Orrin McIntyre, who's been on this show before, a great political commentator. And he says, guys, it's not that complicated. They just want to diddle kids. I think it's a little more complicated than that. I do think there is an ideological aspect of this whole weird sexual movement that we're seeing. I do think that ultimately it stems from the political project of liberation, of liberalism, that liberalism begins with the idea of liberating yourself from dusty old conventions, and liberating yourself from superstition, non-scientific beliefs, which we are told today are allegedly superstitious, liberating yourself from the old political order, the ancien regime. Now we're going to live in a revolutionary political order, liberating yourself from the moral order, liberating yourself from the family, the fundamental political institution. Ultimately, liberating yourself from yourself. That's what the transgender transition is about. The transgender transition is a ritual suicide. It's not a literal suicide, but it's a ritual, figurative suicide through which a person kills himself. He then refers to the person that he has been literally as a dead name. Says that person is dead, talks about that person in the third person and in the past tense. And then out of that dead person, a new identity is allegedly born through this ritual of suicide, because that is the ultimate liberation of the self from the self. The only absurd, illogical conclusion of that, but it is the inexorable conclusion from the premises of liberalism, is suicide. That's the way out. And it's all terribly wrong, and it's led to a cultural suicide and a national suicide, and that's where the logic leads you to. So I do think that's all there. But also, all of that is prefaced to say, some of these people just want to diddle kids. That's it. The guys there cheering, lusting after a 13-year-old boy in a leather outfit and stilettos, jiggling around, they're just perverts. And their desires need to be suppressed by society. I know that we live in the age of love is love, and no desire is ever to be considered disordered or wrong or to be repressed. They need to be suppressed, yeah. There need to be laws against this. There need to be norms against this. We need to round up the men who go to shows like this, and we need to lock them away in institutions or prisons. And we need to tell other people that if they have any desires that are in any way even close to resembling this sort of thing, they need to tamp that down. Stop doing it in public, stop doing it in private, just cut it out. Sometimes things can be really simple like that. If you're part of the hoi polloi here on YouTube, get on over to Daily Wire. Go to dailywire.com/Knowles. Use code Knowles at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.